This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review. Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review, a program dedicated to the word, the thought, and to debate, brought to you by the Van Leer Jerusalem Institute, which promotes humanistic, democratic, and liberal values in the social discourse in Israel. I'm Dalia Shenlin.
And I'm Gilad Halpern. I'm the co-host together with Dalia. And every week we'll be talking about books and ideas and other related stuff. Our guest today is a Belgian-Israeli playwright and director who is in the process of working on her new documentary entitled The Youth of 1948, which documents the last remaining members of the so-called state generation who were old enough to witness the creation of the State of Israel and who are all in their 80s and 90s and some even more. Noemi Schlosser, hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hello, hello.
Okay, so let me start by asking a more general question. The history of 1948 has been covered from many angles, including the social history of the Jewish community at the time, which is what you're more interested in. So what story are you hoping to tell in your documentary?
Well, I'm hoping to reach the heart of the people who are watching the documentary by showing that Israel was not given to the Jewish people on a silver platter. Like, there was a lot of austerity, a lot of death, but also very beautiful stories who turn out very often to be bittersweet rather than just a good laugh or a big tear. It's a very complete, human narrative of people building something out of nothing, getting not a lot of help, getting embargoes on top of everything, and who believed in something bigger than themselves and tried to achieve it. So I'm really trying to cover the memories of children, women, men, political or not politically active, women at home trying to raise kids while the Italians were bombing Tel Aviv, or when they needed to get a pair of red shoes for a party but had to run from door to door because there were snipers on Herzl. So very, very different
Are they heroes, in your view, these people?
I don't know if all of them are heroes, but at least they make me grateful that I didn't have to live their life.
Really? Are you grateful, or do you ever think...
And I'm humbled by hearing how much they put aside so that they and we now can have this Jewish homeland.
I was wondering, are you really grateful that you didn't live at that time, or do you ever think, or do we ever think maybe, I wish I could live in a time of such ideals, such clear, strong ideals and commitment to something bigger than me?
Yes, I understand your question, and it's something that I've been thinking a lot about, because what comes back very often in the interviews is the sense of unity that the Jewish community was feeling. We were all together in this, and we were making it together. And everybody had blood, and everybody had sweat, and everybody had tears, and everybody didn't have anything, but they were happy because they were having this specific goal to achieve. So yes, this is something very idealistic that you want to be part of, but it was hard, and I don't think that people always realize how hard it was.
What kind of questions do you ask them? Challenging questions, or is it just you're asking them to share the stories and memories? Do you direct them? Do you ask open questions? What really, when you go and do the interview, what are you trying to
Well,
get out of it?
It really depends, because some people have arrived here through illegal immigration or before that, or have been for generations in Israel. So that's the first question. Who are you? Where are you born? When did you come to Israel, if relevant?
And probably, how did you come to Israel?
Yes, and how did you come? Why did your parents want to come to Israel? What did Israel mean to you and your parents prior to coming? How was it once you arrived? Can you describe me your childhood or your first memories of Israel? What was the first time you saw Jerusalem or Tel Aviv? What was going through your mind? Some people tell me, after, Lodz, Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, transit camps, the trains to come to Israel, the boat trip, being deported to Cyprus. This woman arrived in after Pesach 1946, and she said, I was in the orchards of Netanya, and I smelled the orange blossom for the first time. And in Hebrew class, in the camps in Cyprus, I had learned about it, but now I could smell it. So those are the little stories that really give a certain nuance about how it was for people to arrive here. Orange blossom or ice cream.
I mean, these sound like amazing sort of stories about the color of day-to-day life. But when you choose your interviewees, how many of them are regular people living day-to-day life and getting those human stories? And how many of them are what we might call elites, VIPs, politicians, generals? I mean, we know you have some, and you can tell us about who they are.
Yeah, I have really a very good mix. I think 10-15% are more knowledgeable people, celebrities.
How many people have you interviewed and are looking to interview overall?
I have interviewed around 50 people so far. From the late 70s, because I try to interview people who were born before 1940 or 1940, so they were at least 7.
Memories.
Yeah. And the oldest person is 104. So that's pretty amazing. This is Yitzhak Pundak. He was a major general in the Haganah.
What's his story?
Oh, he has so many, like sending out, postal doves to a certain village so they would keep in touch, and he didn't hear from that village, he didn't hear from that village, and they became all very, very worried, and then finally they went to visit that village, and they had eaten the doves because they were hungry. So, this is a funny story, but it's not funny when you think about it.
Fresh? Is
His memory is amazing.
But
That's why he was able to live to 104.
Exactly.
He was on the brink of death 16 times.
He counted each one.
He counted each time. It's this man has a memory of when he was 5 years old, and his grandmother in Poland was rather a poor family, and she was selling pickled fish on the market. And so she was preparing it with him, and his brothers were studying, but he was with his grandmother. And his grandmother used to tell him, Yisela, in Yiddish, is going to be a general. And he was a general major. And he still, when he says that, there's so much love. There's so much how did she know? It became like many stories, a kind of, what's the word?
Self-fulfilling prophecy?
Prophetic.
Tell us about some of the other known figures. I think you have Ruth Dayan, the widow of Moshe Dayan.
Yes.
She has lots to say, always. Tell us about her.
She's wonderful. I had coffee with her last week because she signed her autobiography so I could promote my fundraise campaign by selling that book. So if anyone wants to donate on my fundraiser, you'll be eventually picked. She is wonderful to talk to, very, very good in her head. She's 100 since March 6th. And I keep in touch with everyone I speak to. Like, I'm gonna have cake over Pesach with one of her with Etty, because she's like, oh, I'm not religious. Let's have cake on Pesach.
And when you interview people, tell us more about the format. This is a video interview project, right?
Yeah.
How are you going to edit them? How do you decide? Are they going to be the whole interview? Obviously not. So you have to cut them down. How long will each interview be?
So let's say, amongst the more known people I have Haim Guri and Aliza Guri, I've got Amos Horef, I have Refei Eitan, who arrested Eichmann. I'm in the talks to speak to someone very important at this moment, but it's not completely set yet, so I'm not going to deliver his name.
We will leave our listeners in suspense.
Exactly,
Ooh. So how do I do it? Well, to be honest, I let the material guide me. When I'm writing a play or when I'm writing a novel or something, I let the information, the research guide me, and then it becomes how I interpret it. At this point, I know that it's going to be more than a 90-minute documentary. It's actually going to be a documentary series with, in those 90 minutes, the best of 1947, 1948. But next to that, there's going to be a DVD box of 5 one-hour movies that can be used for education, but also just for television or entertainment. That's the goal. About specifically the siege of Jerusalem, the war by the eyes of the children, women in the underground, illegal immigrants and illegal immigration, and one about minorities living in Israel during 1948.
Who were those minorities?
The Druze, the Bedouin, the Christians. For example, there's a diary that I found back that was published by a Christian priest in Jerusalem over the siege. So I'm trying to talk also to Christian Arabs, Palestinians who are now Israeli citizens because they stayed in 1948, and I think they're also happy they stayed. But, I want to hear their personal point of view on 1948.
Did you speak to Palestinians to hear
Not at
perhaps
this point.
the other side of the
No,
1948 story?
I also don't go into the territories because I cannot run with a 16-kilo camera. And my family doesn't want me to go.
Right, but it's an
there.
informed decision not to
But,
cover the Palestinian angle at this stage.
At this stage, in the territories, I'll interview the Israeli Arabs living here, who are part of the people who didn't leave, but who were here in 1947, 1948.
And do you ask your Jewish
And people in Jerusalem as well.
interviewees about the Palestinians, about the conflict, the war, the
Or does
Nakba?
it just come up anyway because they were living here?
It comes up anyway because they tell me about the Arab neighbors, the ones who left, the one who didn't leave, how they left, how they visited like the empty villages, a bit like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, being a bit dragged to go and see it, but afraid to see this empty village, and then find the donkeys walking all over the streets, taking a donkey home, having the donkey run away at night. His father say, "Go fetch your donkey," and the boy of 8 disappeared for 2 days looking for the donkey, and the parents were looking for the 8-year-old for 2 days.
Why were they afraid to go into those villages?
Oh, because it's an empty village. It's weird. A city that is empty.
City,
it's a ghost city. As an 8-year-old little boy, it's pretty scary, but it's 1 kilometer, 1.5 kilometers from your home. So you can go see, and you still, see that there was life. It was stopped, and the people left. They also remember very well that the Haganah went around the streets of Haifa, and the mayor told the people, "Don't leave, stay. Nothing will happen to you." So it's really the memories of the people themselves.
What about the take about Israel today? I mean, I'm sure it comes up.
Yeah.
I mean, to look at today in a historical perspective, perhaps even nostalgic. Can you really pinpoint them on the spectrum somewhere, or do you really get very different responses from extreme pride to extreme disappointment or frustration with what Israel is today?
To be honest, I think 80% of my people have the same answer. Because I always finish my interview with, "It's been 70 years of Israel, how does it make you feel?" It's my last question. And they all say, "Oh, I'm so proud of what we achieved. Look, we built these cities, the technology, the life that we have. There's a Jewish state. But at the same time, we're still at war. My children and grandchildren and probably great-grandchildren have to go to the army. It's still a war." They really are disappointed in the politicians. And it's not the country of vision that they envisioned at the time. They also, very often, they thought that they would win the war. Once they would win the war, it would be settled. Some will come back. Others would maybe not come back, but life would continue. It would be accepted. We're here and we're here to stay.
And you make it sound like you say, our interviewees say, they tell me at the end these things that you just said. What are the biggest points of disagreement between your interviewers on, let's say, for example, where Israel is today? Or are there points of disagreement about actually what happened in the past?
No, I must say that everybody really agrees about what I just said. The sense of unity. This is Israel also, is not the Israel that they remember where people were really working together because of the very polarized political frame now. But even people from the right, people from the left, all have this idea, this slight disappointment that it is not what they envisaged at the time.
You mean in terms of
Political. And, the idea that Israel is not such a united country anymore and that there's still war. And, those people really came in with the best of intentions.
Is that true also of the people that you've interviewed who are the minorities who were here beforehand?
I'm just starting the minorities. I'm starting after Pesach. Mm-hmm. I got my first contacts now, and it takes time also to get into this community. So I need a community leader to give me names because, those are also people who are 18, 90, 100 years old. It's not so easy to find them. It's not easy to find people who are still completely with their head.
Okay, I want to ask you exactly about that. How difficult was it really to talk to people about events that took place 70 years ago? I mean, do you ever double check what they tell you, the facts, the details that they give you? Because it is hard at the end of the day to rely on the waning memory of old people.
Well, you'll be surprised. Obviously, I've had here and there people who have a harder time finding their words, also because most of my interviews are in English because I don't speak
that must limit to some extent
Hebrew. But when it's only possible in Hebrew, I have a family member or someone who comes to translate. So I can still direct the interview and see what is the best next question or pick up on a specific fact that the person is telling me. So, no, many people have a really good memory. Some people ask the questions in advance so they can write things down. Many people also say, oh, thank you. It was good to go back to that time and to talk about it. I must say my boyfriend is a neuropsychologist, specialized in memory and
You've got an expert opinion waiting for you at home.
So at night when I come home, we talk about old people and memory. But
we should talk about young people and memory in my case.
Yeah.
And I always explain how was the interview today, and he said, "Oh, maybe this is first starter of Alzheimer. This is, because of the way that a person speak, he kind of thinks maybe this is this."
So, will you try to verify any of the stories they tell, if you can, and try to give some backstory in your documentary? Like, say, okay, this, after we did this interview, we found out, we tracked this story, we learned that this and that actually happened or didn't happen exactly.
It's very funny that you ask that because. I end up interviewing people from Haifa, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, kibbutz, and many people have stories that come elements together, so I can put the stories together. Yeah, and that's very interesting. And obviously I did my research, so I kind of know what happened in Haifa at the time, what happened in Jerusalem at the time, so I can direct my question specifically. Do you remember the day of? I will say something, the Ben Yehuda bombing in the mandate, or, I can really direct it.
How did you get to this subject matter in the first place? You are a theatre director, not a historical filmmaker. What made you make the switch?
Well, for years, every time I wrote a play, I base it between 5 and 8 years of research in advance. And I wanted to write a play for 70 years of Israel in English, Hebrew, for the audiences here in Israel. My grandmother here in Rishon was in the siege of Jerusalem herself. She got out, lucky her. And so on Yom HaShoah last year, I was invited to someone's living room where a grandmother was talking, but she didn't stop at when the war was over. She continued about her arrival here in Israel and the very difficult times. And me, who is very interested in history and knows I can say a lot because it's really my specialization, modern history, modern Jewish history, for the shows that I write. I realized I really didn't know enough, and that it was this bittersweetness that really would touch me and probably would touch the audiences in a way to bring maybe the young Israeli generation to respect the older generation and to know more also for the Jewish communities outside Israel who see Israel as a party destination for a vacation or the kotel and that's it. I would love them to be able to hear more of the building of the state and how much those people went through. literally to be able to be here
But
today.
in that sense, I find it interesting that many of your interviewees, you're saying, have very similar ideas. Wouldn't it be more interesting to find people who have diversity of views, both about how they experienced what happened and about now? I mean, I'm thinking, for example, are any of your interviewees Jews who came from the Middle East, from Arab countries in the Middle East? Tell us about their stories. Do they differ from those who came from Europe?
The stories in himself, how they came here on the back of donkeys in the 20s. Their parents, they didn't have any money, so the father was a religious Jew, ended up working in the slaughterhouses in Chicago for 1.5 years to be able to sustain his family in Israel. So yeah, the stories are different than the Ashkenazim or the people who came from the 30s, from Odessa or after the war. But it's only the last month that I started interviewing, or found rather. It's not that I didn't want them, but it's not always easy to get to all those communities. I find my people through social media, by children, grandchildren, contacting me by seeing my posts. But as I'm not a Hebrew speaker, I don't get into Hebrew-speaking pages on Facebook, which already cuts off a part of the potential of reaching out to people. So, it's really true asking people around, can you help me get in touch with Iranians, Iraqis? I'm going to have my first Yemenite interview. But it really takes work to find those people. It's really not easy. And I don't choose what they say. They tell me what were their memories and what their opinions are about 70 years of Israel.
But would you try to ask them, to hear the human side of the stories behind some of the things that are often, important elements of Israeli history that are controversial or being discovered even in recent years? I mean, for example, I'm thinking of the controversy of Yemenites who had children taken away,
babies,
or who were sprayed with DDT. I mean, these are things that are sort of open wounds in the Israeli discourse over what happened. And you can ask them, would you consider doing that? Do you try to do that or not?
Look, old people have a specific amount of time that they are able to give an interview. Sometimes I've got to stop after 30 minutes for half an hour for them to rest a little bit, have a coffee, eat something. It's not like a 20 or 30-year-old. So I really have to be very specific.
No, but is it something that you're aiming for? Or is it
I'm aiming for end of the mandate, 47, 48. When people start talking to me about the mid-50s, I've got to push them back to what happened, what are your memories on 47, 48.
You're thinking birth of a nation.
Yeah,
I'm thinking birth of the nation, yeah. And obviously things come up, but, I'm not doing Holocaust reports either. Some people tell me because it's part of who they are when they arrived here, but it's not what's going to be per se in my documentary. There is a part of a documentary Holocaust survivors fighting in the War of Independence, then it can be put in that part. But I'm really specifically looking for those 2-3 years here at that time.
Who's your ideal target audience? Are they Israeli, younger Israeli, older Israelis, an international audience?
Well, it's very different because I'm looking for all those different audiences. Why? Because of different reasons. I think the Europeans would learn more and maybe have a little bit more respect for the other narrative that we never hear. In Belgium, I think the young Israelis should realize also because even Ruth Dayan tells me, it's good to teach history about the Holocaust, but, this is their history. So they should learn it more in school. And for the young Americans who see Israel as a holiday destination, and, for the bar mitzvah, but to give a deeper layered history. So young people, older people, I think this documentary box that I'm planning to make and those archives, because all the footage will be donated to the National Library, in 10, 20 years when someone will make a PhD about the birth of the state or research this, they will use my footage to review it.
All right. Noemi Schlosser, Belgian-Israeli playwright and theatre director, and also now a documentary filmmaker working on her forthcoming film, entitled The Youth of 1948. Thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you. And also a big thanks to Tammy Goldenberg, our sound engineer, and to the Van Leer Institute for their generous support. If you like this podcast, there are many more where it came from. Just go to www.tlv1.fm/podcasts and take your pick, or just listen to them all, which is what we recommend. Don't forget to visit our new website, telavivreview.org. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. We'll be taking a short break for Passover, returning on the 28th of April. Make sure you join us. Until then, goodbye.